morning, aspiring detectives. I am Chief Detective King, and welcome to the King Detective Agency. You might be wondering why you are here. Because of your interest in the Chinese language, and of course your exceptional scores on the National Detective exam, you have been recruited to join this agency. Now, as an agency, we solve some of China's most challenging cases, and we try to bring justice to those in need. So those are our objectives. This year, we are solving a very particular case, and one that hits very close to home for me. You see, this past summer, in August, 人民日报, the People's China Daily, reported that one of my friends, Ben Farkas, was found dead. Now, they claimed that it was a natural death, or perhaps even a suicide. But Mr. Farkas, or Fan Xianshen, as I'll refer to him from this point forward, was a dear friend of mine. We went to college together. We roomed together our senior year. We were part of the same cooking co-op and cooked really delicious Chinese food. It was really great. But anyway, the point is that I knew Fan Xianshen very, very well, and I am highly suspicious that his death was the result of a natural death or a suicide. This is Fan Xianshen's last Facebook post on August 24th, 2005, one day before he passed away. He was a man who loved to travel. He traveled to Europe, to Asia, and he finally found his home in Shanghai about 1 year ago. And just to prove that I didn't, rip this off Google Images or something like that, here's my graduation photo with him. You can see the arrow pointing to him, and I'm just one spot to his right in that photo. So we did graduate together, and there we are, looking brightly into the future of what awaited ahead, but his life was cut too short. And here is one more with two other members of our cooking co-op. If you ever see that guy in the middle, he will offer you his mapo doufu, but please do not accept it. It is disastrous. We had it in the co-op, and our stomachs were not feeling well for weeks upon weeks. But anyway, back to this case. So our objective this year, okay, is to solve this mystery and find what was the true cause of death for Fan Xianshen. And doing so will be no easy task. Chinese is by no means an easy language, and you will have to master and become proficient in many aspects of the language to do well to solve this case. But do not be afraid, be brave. I will be there to guide you, to lead you, and to do whatever is necessary to help you figure out what really happened to my dear friend. Now, because of my emotional ties to this case, I do not feel I can remain an impartial detective on this case. And so by the end of this year, it truly is up to you and your classmates to determine whether Benjamin Farkas's death was a natural death or whether something more heinous was involved. Thank you for taking the time to join me this morning. I hope by working together, we can solve this case. 谢谢大家.
Okay, good morning again, everyone. My name is Jeffrey King. I am a teacher of Chinese and chemistry at Camden County Technical Schools in New Jersey. I teach high school, and in our school we have 2 years of Chinese. So I teach Chinese 1 and I teach Chinese 2. If you need to email me for any reason, my email is right there, and I believe it's also on your packet. The packet has my school email, so if you want to write this one down as well, but I check each one just as frequently. So if you have any questions, if you would like to request any materials, this PowerPoint, whatever you need, I am definitely willing to share because I think together maybe we can make this better and so forth. Okay, so what you've just heard from me is the first thing that I tell my students on the first day of class. So I greet them at the door, I say, 我叫金老师, 你叫? They look at me confused for a second, and then they respond, married, okay, and so forth. And then they grab their seats, and then what you just heard is the very first thing that they hear. That you just heard, that's what I tell them. My goal is to pop them into the immersion immediately, pop them into the language immediately, and really get going and to jump into this detective case. All right, so that's really the objective there. I guess you guys got a sense of that as students. How did you feel as a student? Let's say you were a student in this class. How did we feel? You can just shout out. Go ahead.
It was great.
It was good? Okay, good? Yeah? Okay, so I think you get both ends of the spectrum. So some kids are like at the edge of their seat, they're so excited, they're gonna fall out of their seat. But then you get the eye rolls, you're like, what are we, in kindergarten? Or is this, what kind of scenario are you delving into? But either way, right, these kids are intrigued. They're like, this is going to be something very, very different. And that there is a big thing for me, trying to get students engaged in this story. Okay, so let's take a look at kind of my goals for today. So my goal isn't to really convince you that this is the best way to go about teaching the language. I am just offering a possible way to teach it. And I really just want you to think throughout this presentation here, compare what I'm doing here with what you currently do. And maybe you say, you know, I don't like the whole thing, but maybe I could take pieces from it. Or maybe I could take one lesson, or maybe I could take a unit, or maybe I could take a concept from it, and really compare to what you're doing and see what things you like and see what things you don't like. You know, maybe this is not for you. And then if you do like it, I hope you can actually learn to implement it and have the tools to implement it. So certainly I'd be willing to talk to you through email or things like that, or to provide resources. And so that's really what I hope the goal is for today. Okay, so what's the case for today? All right, so I'm going to start off and tell you where this idea came from. So why a detective case? Why did I decide to have this year-long theme where students are trying to solve one case, and that's the Ben Farkas case on the fourth square there. I'm going to tell you what it looks like in my classroom. So what is the flow, like what is the kind of curricular flow, and also what does it look like in the classroom? What does my class look like? How do lessons go? And then we're going to take a look at two cases today. The first one, the Jun Shang case, this is the very first case that students get. This is about 3 weeks in, and this is, excuse my handwriting, it's not the pad or anything, it's just my handwriting is that bad. 3 weeks in, this is the first case that they get, all right? And then at the end, I'll show you kind of the transition in between, and then we only have time, we don't have that much time, unfortunately. So at the very end, I'll show you the final case, where everything comes together and we solve who committed the crime. And then at the end, we can talk about other possibilities and alternatives. Maybe you don't like a detective case, maybe that's not the story for you, but are there other things you could do that makes students engaged in this process? Okay, so that's kind of the plan. And the first question I kind of get is, why a detective case, right? Well, why a detective case in the first place? Well, this detective case really came from two problems I was seeing for my students. Now, my students are from an urban environment. Most of them are from Camden City. And with that is I find my students have a tendency to shut down once they see, for example, this huge block of characters. Okay, so they see that block of characters and they're like, nope, not for me, I'm not doing it, all right? Because it is intimidating, and I can relate to that, right? Like they see this and they're like, oh my God, right? How am I going to do this? So they have a tendency to shut down, and it's my job to really, take it step by step with them and get them motivated. Now, even the ones who are excited about the language and who want to try to interpret this, they told me that, I really don't care about Leo. Right? Like, who really cares about Leo? Who cares about Wang Xunshen? Who are these people, right? And teenagers, they're very self-absorbed. And so they really want to talk about themselves, or they really want to talk about something they care about, and they just don't care about these characters, okay? And so I was struggling with that the first year. And similarly, interpretive tasks, right? If I'm listening to someone, who is this guy? Why is he here? Why am I listening to him? What's the context, right? And I actually think this clip, I don't know if you've seen this before, but it's just a short clip, and it's not bad for asking about nationality. It's actually pretty reasonable in terms of what you can do with the language in terms of authenticity. But, things can be authentic, but students still might not care about them if it doesn't relate to them somehow, right? It can be as authentic. You could have a conversation with your mom, and it could be the most authentic language because it's a real conversation, but students still might not care about it. So I was really struggling with those two aspects. They loved speaking to each other in the language. That was no problem, but once you had them listen to something else, interpretively, or to read something, that's where the problem came. All right, so I had those two problems, and then the other final problem I was seeing is that my students could tell that it seemed like I was just trying to get through the textbook, right? Like, okay, here's chapter 1, and we're going to learn this, and here's chapter 2, we're going to learn this. And students were a little bit frustrated with that. They could tell that, hey, you're just going through the textbook. And I could try to do something like I could try to make a task-based assessment, maybe about chapters 1, 2, and 3. Group those together, make an assessment like you're having an interview or something like that. Something task-based for them. But they could still tell that it's the content that's driving what we're learning. It's the textbook that's driving what we're learning, instead of some other compelling reason that's driving what we're learning. So all those together made me say, let's try to make something more engaging. At the time, I was watching a Chinese detective series, 少年包青天, and I was like, oh, this is awesome, like I want to be a detective. And I also have a kind of a background in video games. I love video games, and I thought, okay, this could be cool, this could be really cool if I had a detective case and they had to solve something, and they had to learn about all these suspects, right? Learn about all these criminals, learn about all the witnesses, and find that information, compare and contrast, and decide, hey, that's the person who did the crime. And so that's where it really all came together. And the other thing I really like about the detective analogy is that learning Chinese, I'm learning all languages, but I think Chinese in particular, is really being a detective. I mean, you have these characters, and you're like, oh, I know the radical, so that's a clue. I know the sound of that, so maybe that's a clue. I know this piece, but I don't know that piece, so I'm piecing these clues together to figure it out. Or I'm looking at this block of text here, and I'm like, well, I don't know this red word, but I do know this word, and I know this word, so what could these possibly mean? Learning a language is very much being a detective in its own right, and so I really like that analogy for my students, and I really try to pound it into them. That learning a language is really being a detective. You might not know what's going on, but you can figure it out. You can figure it out. Okay. So that was my goal. So let's take a look at what this looks like in my classroom. All right. And we'll start with the flow of the class. So the very first day they get this big case. It's an enormous case. That's the final case we actually do. That Benjamin Farkas case. But throughout the year, they're taking a look at smaller cases. So they start very small. They start with one person, Jun Chang. That's the first victim. All right, and that story builds. So Jun Chang, he gets shot in the forehead. Why did that happen? What happened there? Then it gets bigger. Now the entire family of criminals are involved. Oh my God, we got to solve that case. Now celebrities are getting involved. Oh my goodness, we got to solve that case. And then finally, after the trail, that finally gives us enough information to figure out who killed Benjamin Farkas, which was our original goal, if you remember, to figure out who killed my friend Benjamin Farkas. So you can think of these as quote-unquote units, but they're really tasks, right? They're really cases that at the end they have to accomplish this task, they have to accomplish this task, they have to accomplish this task. And obviously there are other things going on instruction-wise in here. These aren't the only things going on. It's hard to stay on point all the time, but at least they know what they're looking forward to at the end. They know what case they're getting involved in. Here is my room. This is what my room looks like. And you'll notice a few things. For example, the seating, right? So my students, each of these is kind of a detective team, all right? So they work in teams. So they're like part of an agency, but each of them is their own detective team with their own detective team name and so forth. And what you see here is kind of it's like a duct tape spreadsheet, all right? So anytime, let's say team one, they figured out, hey, this is a suspect, and I figured out that the suspect is 中国人, he's Chinese, right? And then maybe I reward them 5 points for that. All right, so there's a kind of gamification to this as well, where they're earning points for their team as they figure out different things in this mystery. And as they earn more and more points for their team, what that results in is kind of just a generic leaderboard for their team. So no one really feels that bad because it's a team-based thing. But then, deeds will, how many points did they earn? Okay, they earned 1,931. Second place has 1,831 points. And it's just a little bit of a competitive touch to the thing. Now, this is a little bit more intense. This is I've been dabbling in programming a little bit, and I've kind of created this online program where you can click here, and then let's say I want to explore Nei Mongol, right? I want to figure out, what's in Nei Mongol? And if they earn enough points, they can explore that area. Now, during this whole time, there's a side quest. There's another quest on the side, another mystery on the side as to who murdered this other guy. And once they click on here, what opens up is now some information about that place and two detectives talking to each other, asking information about, hey, 你几岁? Or 他几岁? 他是哪里人? This very suspicious-looking guy right here. And they're having a conversation, and students can take those notes and use those to further solve other cases that they have on the side. So it's like you earn more points, and then you do more work. And then you do more work, you earn more points, and it's just kind of this repeating cycle for them. But I found that that's really getting them excited. Earning those points and then being able to figure out more of the mystery as they go. Okay. So that's kind of, I mean, this could be a whole presentation in itself. This class that I'm running is really, you can fit it under project-based learning, you can fit it under gamification, but there have been presentations on that earlier in this conference, and I think a lot of them did a good job. But I'm going to focus on the story-based aspect, because I think that's an aspect that hasn't been really talked about, and letting the story drive the content, and that's what I'm trying to do here. But there are a lot of other aspects involved here. Okay. Before we jump into this first case, any questions? Go ahead.
Students like follow the textbook, they have a level of language. Story cannot follow that. So all of a sudden you have the most difficult sentence structure already, and it's very difficult, not similar to say age and should.
Sure.
Do you design the conversation based on the level and you progress?
Yeah, I try to. So, for example, the first marking period, the map they explore, they're very basic questions like this. Later on, they might ask, 他穿什么衣服, or 他的衣服什么颜色, or something like that. What color is their clothing? Later on with the content. And so I kind of try to pace the level that way. But yeah, you're right. Obviously, I couldn't just have one entire database, and the first question they get is like, what's the weather like today? And they haven't learned weather yet, and then they would just get really frustrated. Yeah, good question.
How do you teach the vocabulary and the chants? Do you ask them to find out by themselves, or do you give time to teach them things?
Yeah, I'll jump into the case, and maybe that'll explain how I go through each unit, I guess. Yeah, but yeah, that's a good question. Okay. All right, moving on. So the first case my students look at is the Jun Shang case, and this is a video we're going to watch that I made, and I tell my students that he got shot in the forehead, and they're like, he didn't get shot in the forehead. And it really just grazed them. I have to explain that, it just barely grazed them, all right? So these people are after one of my friends, and we got to figure out what's going on. Now, this is at the very beginning of the unit, okay? So at this point, what they've learned some classroom objects, they learned some classroom commands, like, just classroom things that I need done before I really delve into the thing, like, 看听说, 举手, things like that, and they know 铅笔, 你有没有铅笔, things like that. So they got all that out of the way. But that's all they've learned. They haven't learned anything else. And this is the first thing I say, all right, well, this weekend, my friend, he unfortunately got shot in the forehead. Let's figure out what's going on. And this is the video that I played. So we'll watch this video. Okay, there he is. Not looking so great. There you go.
同学们好，我叫向军，我是金老师的朋友，我今年24岁。我是美国人，可是我目前在中国。我看到一个女人，她有手枪，她也有周杰伦的 T 恤，她大概25到35岁。好了，我累了。
Okay. So after that, so he described his age, he described nationality, his location, just some very basic things. And in terms of authenticity, right, this is not the most authentic thing, right? It's not the most realistic thing. But what it is for students is it's very compelling in the context that we're in. And in that sense, it's just as good, I think. It's not the most realistic thing, but it is contextual, at least. And so they can pick up a lot of context clues. And at first they think he died. They're like, oh my God, he just died. But once you know the language, you can tell he's just tired, right? And like, oh, he was actually just tired. Okay, he's still alive. There are just some cultural notes here. I guess Chinese people also like Stitch. Disney is pretty popular there. And so just some things that students can kind of relate to in this video. But that's the first thing they see. They don't understand anything. They're like, oh my God, what just happened? Like, we didn't learn any of this, right? Okay, I was like, that's okay. This just happened. Let's figure out what happened. Okay, so they got that, and now this is where there's maybe like a 3-4 week gap where everything we learn is going towards figuring this out. So this is where I teach the vocab. This is where I teach the grammar, and I do teach it. So, for example, one of the activities I do is I give each person they write down their nationality, and then they ask, 你是哪里人？你是哪国人？ and then they respond to that in an interpersonal type of way. So I do still do a lot of the fundamental activities, but they know exactly why they're learning about it. They know, oh, we need to know this person's nationality, so let's really get that vocabulary down so I can do it, right? So they know the purpose. They know ultimately that vocabulary is going to come back in some way to help them solve this case. So there is a lot of traditional teaching that targets the different modes of speaking and reading and so forth, but they know it's ultimately to solve this case. Okay. All right, so that's the first video I showed them, and then I say 3 or 4 weeks later, okay, we're ready. I think we're ready to solve this case. And then I give them this sheet of very suspicious-looking suspects. All right. So here are 4 suspects, and their names are kind of crazy because I'm trying to use characters that they can understand or parts of their name that they have as the classes. So none of these names are really that realistic. Some of them are okay. But then they have this table. They need to figure out what they've been learning, the age, they need to figure out the nationality, and they need to figure out what objects these people had on them when they were accosted, right? So they have this suspect list, and I believe it's in your packet. I think you have it in your packet. And so that's the suspect list I give them. Now they're ready for an interpretive task, and I tell them, remember I said those interpretive tasks early on that I showed you, they were mortified by that block of text. Well, now I show them this, and they're actually excited to go. They're excited to see, hey, what is up with this guy? What objects does he have? How old is he? And so forth. And I think you also have this sheet. So again, not the most authentic thing, but it's just me describing, making notes of what's going on here. What is up with each of these suspects. So, I mean, you can kind of, and they get excited about it, they'll say, oh my god, this guy has a knife? All right, and they're like, it's that guy today. And they're like, oh, shit, this guy did, 还有手枪. Like, oh my god. Giving them, I had a debate a little bit about whether I want to give them the word for 手枪, like handgun, right? Like that's a dangerous kind of word to throw around. But you'll find that if you border on the edge a little bit, they're excited to use those words, and they'll use that in a new grammatical structure whenever they can. So when we learn 喜欢不喜欢, likes and dislikes, first question, 你喜不喜欢手枪? And then boom, the grammar is there. The grammar is there. They just apply it immediately. So it's a little bit controversial, and you might need to get public. Yeah, your district might need to approve that. But it is part of the case. We're solving a detective case, and the reality is there are a lot of dangerous weapons that go along with it. Okay, so how I do this is, so I've tried it a couple ways. You could assign this for homework. You could do that. You could do it in a class as a class-based activity. You could do that. What I do is I have each member of the class, or team, remember they're in teams of 3 or 4, take one of the suspects, all right, and really break down that suspect and determine what is going on with that suspect, and fill out this table here that we have here. So if I'm looking up okay, I say, okay, 美国和台湾, go back and I'll fill this in, okay, 美国和台湾人. Now they're filling out the data table, and at the end, once they each get the information, they share it with each other, so that everyone now on their team has the information for each of these suspects. Okay. Sure.
So do you provide any language support for them to understand this?
The thing we do before going over this is on this sheet. So by this time, I've taught the vocabulary for all the nationalities, for example. I've taught all the how to describe your age. I've taught how to describe what items you have and don't have. So before this, they have kind of different sheets that point to, okay, how do you describe what you have and don't have? And they have vocab lists that go along with this. And so the only thing I do before they delve into this is I remind students, okay, I think I have another sheet, and I say, okay, if他几岁, what is a key character I can look for to help me figure out whether someone is giving his age or not? And they'll tell me, oh, look for 岁, right? And I would write down, okay, let's look for 岁 in this one, if you're looking for the age. And then you can find, close. It's like being a detective. Once you find that key character, look around to find, can I find the age? And that's the only support I give them before they delve into interpreting the text.
How much time did you spend on preparing the vocabulary?
So probably, I want to say 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah, so there's time in between, each day, because they have to practice speaking. This is only the interpretive task. of it. They need to practice speaking it, they need to practice listening to it before I feel like they're ready for this. Yeah, but this is kind of like almost a final assessment. Do you get it? And if people do all this, I know, okay, they've got it, because this is a contextual situation in which they have to apply themselves. Okay, all right, so now they got information about the suspects, and that's great, right? But we can't accuse someone just because they have a knife or a gun, you know. Maybe they got it legally, right? So now we need some more information. So we go back and we watch that first video we saw. And that first video, the victim described what the criminal looked like. He described his age, he described his nationality. So we re-listened to that. And once students listen to that again, they're like, oh, I get it. I get his nationality, I get his age. And they jot it down in this sheet right here. So here is the victim of the crime, and there are questions as to relating to what he saw. So this is, you know, 罪犯几岁? How old is the criminal? What nationality is the criminal, or where is he from? Is it a guy or a girl? What objects does that person have? And we do go over the specific vocabulary words for the detective and the criminal and the suspect, because we need to learn that to be able to talk about this. So we're just going to learn whatever is necessary to solve this mystery. That's our goal, right? That's our goal. Okay, so they listen to that first one, they jot down the information, and then we listen to two more by the Jintan on the case, the detective on the case, and also a witness. And I'll show you both of those so you can get a sense of the level that I'm expecting them to be able to understand after this. So here is the detective giving his or her speech.
你们好，我叫008，我是中国人，我20岁，我是中国一名侦探。犯罪现场有毒品、绳子、纸和一面台湾国旗。
So after the first time, they maybe get one thing, right? Which is fine. They maybe picked up one thing. And then we replay it, and then they listen again, and they try to pick up more things. And then they might replay it again so that they can pick up more things. But they're trying to understand what happened in this case and what's going on. And so that one right there. And then I just kind of throw in a little twist, just things building that I want to spiral on. So, you know, a kind of inside joke there is her name was Li Ling Ba, right? Like 008. Okay, so just kind of an inside joke there, a reference there. And some other ones like, you know, 中国一名侦探. Like they don't necessarily understand everything there, but maybe they can piece together 中国侦探. Oh, okay, I probably know what she's saying. And then at the end, you know, the 国旗, we don't know what that is, but it's related to Taiwan somehow. So there are just little things in there that can be clues that can help your students build on that. All right, so as they're doing this, they're jotting this down in here. They're jotting down, okay, what objects were at the crime scene, and now we move to the witness for one final piece of evidence as to what the criminal does. So this is a little bit.
请进，请进。你好，怎么样？
不错不错，你呢？
很好，谢谢，请坐，请坐。好，让我帮你倒点茶。
谢谢。
是。好，请问你叫什么名字？
我叫袁慧玲。
袁慧玲。好，谢谢。你是哪里人？
我是新加坡人。
新加坡人。啊，我有一个朋友，他也是新加坡人。那你今年几岁？
我今年23岁。
23岁。好，谢谢你。那天。 想一想，你看到了什么？
那天，我看到了嫌疑人，他有枪，还有笔。
手枪对吗？
手枪。
手枪和笔。那支笔是铅笔还是圆珠笔呢？
好像是圆珠笔。
哦，圆珠笔，好，谢谢。他是男的还是女的呢？
好像是男的。
男的。
也好像是女的。我不知道。
好，好，没关系。嫌疑人大概几岁？
嫌疑人大概23岁到35岁。
23到35岁，好。他像是哪里人？
他
他像是日本人或者越南人。
日本人或是越南人，很有意思。好吧，万一我需要跟你联络，你的手机号码是？
我的手机号码是25338888。
哦，是25338888，对吗？
对。
好，谢谢。我没有其他问题，谢谢你。
谢谢。
好，再见。
再见。
That's just the kind of final piece there, in more conversation if I want them to understand that. But during that time, they're collecting clues. Sometimes I split that half and half. It's a pretty long video. So I get facts about the witness first and then talk about what she saw on that day. But a few fun things, just cultural notes that you don't really see until you make these videos is that, my students will comment like, oh, Jing 老师, 你是个 player, like you're pouring tea for her, right? Oh, smooth move right there. And they see that something as like me trying to, pick up someone. And then at the end, when I ask for her number, they think also that that's the closing end of it. So, it's just in the context and in the culture, they think it's just, there's, pouring tea, that's just natural, that's just something you do in the culture. But, it's just funny what students can see from that. So they gather all that information. They know that, okay, this is they gathered the information there. And what I do before I do anything else is I have them hand in a team sheet here where each person is responsible for a part and they turn that information in. Okay. And then once they have that, I provide that again. I collect the data, I put everything together, and here is the final information that they collect, for example. And so once everyone has handed that in, they see how they did, but I need them to have the right information before they actually try to solve this particular case. So here is the information that they have, and now they're going to solve this case with this information. Okay, based on this sheet, and also this sheet right here that they used, now they can compare and contrast. And finally make a judgment. So what I asked for them, and I showed you have some student samples. It's better on your page. You have a handbook there, or sorry, a packet there. This is what I expect them to hand in to me. So, for example, first thing they have to do is they tell me who they think did it. So which of those 4 people did it? They write their name right here at the top. Okay, so that's who they think they did it. And they have to give me a reason. So they give me, oh, 他29岁, he's 29. Okay. But then, just saying someone's 29 isn't enough to accuse them of a crime, and they have to back it up. So their backup is, oh, the victim here said the criminal was 25 to 35 years old. And for me at this stage, that's enough for me, right? It's very basic. It's not completely grammatically correct that a fluent Chinese person might say, or a native Chinese person, but that's okay. For me, that they're able to do that and they're able to justify a reason, that's very higher order thinking to me, and they constantly have to compare and contrast, right? They have to use this sheet, say, okay, he's 29, then they've got to go back to this sheet and say, okay, what about the criminal? Was the criminal 29? How old was the criminal? And they've got to put those pieces together to make a case to me that this person is the criminal because of these 2 reasons, okay? And I asked them to give me 4 reasons, and so, here's a second reason, here's a third reason, and so forth. And then, I think to get the full score, they need 4. But the funny thing is that there are more than enough examples for each of these people. So I think this person has like 4 reasons, and maybe 3 reasons for her. So they can really pick and choose. They can make an argument for either case. There really is no right answer. And at the end of it, once students submit their project, I collect it, and I see who is the winner, then we arrest someone, okay? Then we arrest them. We say, boom, you guys voted her, she's arrested. Okay, and so the students get a sense that they're actually contributing something, that they've done something. All I have to do is take a tally, show a graph, and say, oh, you guys voted for this person, we're going to arrest that person right now. Okay, and that's kind of the presentational aspect of this task. So we had 2 interpretive parts, and then this is a presentational part where they now have to present their data and justify who is the criminal and why. And then that kind of sums up the case. Okay. Any questions about this case before we kind of slide over? Go ahead. Sure.
One, the conversation is quite complex and fast.
Mm-hmm.
Repeating things more, you can make it slower. video on one side or give the student a sheet of what kind of actually the conversation is, and then study, so they really fully understand what is the conversation all about, the interview.
So sorry, so you're saying put the video on one side?
Or, I mean, that's just fancy to say,
Sure.
but then they can all have a sheet, simple thing, just they understand, study the sheets, so they totally understand what all the whole conversation.
So you have the script on a sheet, you're saying?
Yes,
Okay.
words. Because otherwise, for the first years,
Yeah.
this is an awfully difficult.
Yeah, so I do, so I want them to practice their listening in particular for this one.
Right.
So I try to avoid the sheet.
Right.
But what I do before to prepare them is, I first of all, I chunk it. So I want to play this video the whole way. Well, I play it through once, play the whole thing. And then I say, all right, let's listen to the first half 3 or 4 more times. And then they know exactly what they're looking for. They know, on this sheet, they know they're looking for the age, the nationality, boy or girl. So they're listening specifically for those things, and that's the reason they can handle it. If I just said, tell me what happened, they wouldn't get it. But because they're listening for specific things, they're listening, okay, I know I need to get the nationality, so let me listen for Ren.
Right.
And then they know, okay, Ren, oh, it had to be before that. What was that word before that? And then the next time they can listen for it again. And so this one, I'm just really trying to hone in on their listening rather than their reading, because I don't want to get them mixed up. I'm really testing their listening here.
It's pretty complex.
Yes, it is pretty complex, but they get it. They get it. They can get it if you guide them beforehand. Like if I didn't have this sheet and I just had to figure out what happened, you're right, they would have no clue. They don't know what to look for. But because of the context, they know exactly what they're looking for. And so they can just listen for specific words. And for me, that's enough at this stage in the beginning for this assessment, for example. Yeah. But that's, did you have another point?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
The second question is this whole thing is working by a team? It's a team group of students? You have 4 teams?
Yeah, yes. So their teams are 3 or 4.
How can you tell that the team is dominated by more advanced students? The weaker strong silent student, they won't say anything. It's always dominated by the leader of the team.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And the other half of the students are not learning the same, but most advanced students will figure out everything.
Yeah, so as of now, I don't officially, I use more of this as an informal assessment, but you could do it individually for a more formal assessment. That's certainly possible. If I were going to use this as a formal assessment, I would actually do it in the computer lab where I put the video on some kind of Dropbox and each student could listen to it, and then that's how I do it as an actual assessment. Because you're right. But how I differentiate there is, I assign each person in the team, they're at least listening to one question. So maybe the person who's not as strong, maybe he or she will just listen for the nationality. So at least he or she can contribute that way. And so even though they only get one fact, like the person who's really good is going to get all the facts. But maybe this one person can only get 1 or 2 facts during the teaching of the lesson. And that, for me, that's okay. But if you want to use this as an assessment, yes, I'll do an individual, have it on a Dropbox, have them have headphones, they're all listening and to figure out what it is. So you can even do this for homework, right, where they each have to listen to one part and bring back that information. There are a lot of ways to break this up that I think could be dynamic for students. Yeah. Question, go ahead.
What is the age and level of the students?
This is for first-time learners, so they're all high school students. They take it in 10th grade at my high school, and they come in with no prior knowledge. We don't have any heritage learners or anything like that, but they understand this. They understand it because I think what really helps them make sense of it is the context. They know exactly what they're trying to do, and so even though it's a very difficult dialogue, they know the key words. They know ren, they know sui, they know what they're looking for, and they can piece it together from that. And they know the questions, right? Because they've practiced the question, 你几岁?你是哪里人? So in that dialogue, once they hear 你几岁, they're like, oh my God, the age is coming. The age is coming, and they're ready.
Do you teach all this in Chinese?
So my policy is that during activities, everything is in Chinese. But if I'm explaining the instructions, I'll do it in English. So for example, maybe just a random task is everyone has a card with nationalities, and you need to figure out the nationality of other people, and you get points if you can get their nationality. So, when I'm explaining that, it's all in English. Here's the objective. You're trying to guess the other person's card. But during that activity times, it's all 你是哪里人?你几岁? It's all in the language, otherwise they lose points. Yeah. Okay, all right. So we've wrapped up this case, so we figured out, okay, this is the information here. They presented that, and we arrest this person. Okay, so we've arrested that person, and Unfortunately, 3 days later, I told my students, somehow she escaped. 她跑了. Okay. Oh no. And then I give them this family tree, and we realize, wait a second, that person looks familiar. This person looks familiar. Oh my God, this looks like a family of criminals here. Okay, so actually, they're like, oh my God, I knew those 2 people. And so, but none of them want to accuse 2 people, right? Because that's too much work. So they only accused 1 person, and so now the person got away because they didn't accuse the right number of people. Now, this is kind of like a gotcha kind of thing, but it gives them a sense of pacing, a reason for why things are happening, right? Otherwise, why are we learning about family in the first place? Well, we have this criminal, this crime scene family, and they're working together. So who else in this family is a criminal? Well, let's tap their phone line and listen to what they have to say. So I tell my students, this is usually over one of the breaks we have, and I say, I went to China and I tapped some phone lines. All right, I tapped some phone lines, and this is what they have to say. Okay, so here's one piece of dialogue.
你好，不好意思你，
外婆好，你怎么样？
我很好，你有没有剑？
我有剑，为什么？
你爸爸想要。
Okay, so very out there, but there are some more normal ones. I have 5 or 6 of these, of wiretappings. And so the conversation really revolves around, they can understand some of it initially, but in order to figure out who in the family is doing it, they have to master the vocabulary here in terms of the family, in terms of who is talking to who. And so they're learning about family relationships in that way, and that's how I kind of get them to really listen for the family members. They need to listen to who is talking to who and to develop that relationship. And so this is just kind of a mini lesson throughout. It's not, they don't have to solve anything at the end, but they're just deciding, okay, who is really suspicious? You know, the person who asked for that sword, that person is probably a little bit suspicious. Someone who asked for a handgun, probably a little bit suspicious. Someone who asked for a computer, maybe not so suspicious. Okay, so they're just kind of thinking in their minds, who is suspicious here? Okay. All right. So we're moving along. We tap wires, and then suddenly something happens. And I won't go into this case, but there's a crime family case. This guy's a victim. There's another interview. There are possible suspects as the family members. These are all family members, right? And they finally have to accuse someone of being the criminal. So similar things as last time, but with a little bit of twist. Now they know how to say likes and dislikes. Now they know how to say family members, so they can bring those into the accusations as well when they're making the case. So I won't show you the videos for the sake of time, but they're similar to the previous one. Okay, so we arrest this guy. I think last year we arrested that guy, the husband of the family, and we said, okay, we arrested this guy, and what we found out from this guy is that actually a celebrity hired him. Okay, so a celebrity hired this entire family to do their dirty work. Okay, so that's how the story moves along, and so now they're doing. It's not really their fault. There's a bigger problem here. Okay, there's a bigger problem, and the bigger problem is that a celebrity is hiring them to do this case. All right, and I'm actually going to skip this one for the sake of time, but he gives a witness testimony as to where celebrities are on a certain day, what the weather's like in the city, where they're located, on which dates, so date, time, location, weather are all involved in this one. Yeah, I'll skip it for now. But no, okay, I'll play. Okay, I'm confused. Should I play it? Yeah. Okay. I don't know. All right. And so here it is. So this is about I would say towards the end, maybe of second, maybe the beginning of third marking period.
我叫江汉生，我是金老师的朋友。我是美国人，可是目前在日本。我喜欢睡觉和打电子游戏，我也喜欢电脑。我喜欢吃牛肉面和烧鸭馄饨面。第一个嫌疑人叫周杰伦，他8月25号在上海，他2点半跟科比打了篮球，然后4点15分跟范启明吃了汉堡。那天上海下了大雨，22到27度。第二个嫌疑人叫汪峰，他8月23号到25号在台北唱了歌。那天台北晴天，29到31度。 第3个嫌疑人是梁静茹，她8月25号3点半到6点半在上海看电影。那天上海下大雨，22到27度。
So for this one, I just took all the artists I don't like and put them as suspects, right? So how I got these suspects is throughout the year I do something called an Artist Friday, and this is not really related to the detective case, but every Friday I'll play a song that's related to the vocabulary we're learning. So for example, when we learn about family, we listen to 外婆 by Zhou Jielun. When we learn about locations, cities, we listen to 北京 by Wang Feng. When we learn about dates and years, we listen to 10年 by Chen Yixun. Okay, so I've kind of had this database of artists, and so I'm saying every artist we've learned about is on the chopping block. I want to know who did this crime. I don't know which celebrity did it, but one of these celebrities did it, and so everyone is on the chopping block. And just to give you a sense of what I do here is every Friday I just play one of their songs, and they have to figure out all this information about them, just a kind of a review every week, the age, nationality, things like that, their date of birth, and then, one question usually is, 你喜不喜欢他的歌? Something very basic, and they can say, oh yeah, I like the song, I didn't like the song, but at least they're doing something listening. You can also do cultural things like, what is different about this music video than this music video? Now they might have to do that in English, but at least you're incorporating some culture into your conversation here. You can ask very unique questions. So for example, we listen to 小情歌 by 苏打绿. And if you know Soda Green, that band, the male lead vocalist, his voice is very girly in terms of how it sounds. And so I asked, 他是男人还是女人? Kind of as a joke, right? But at least they get a sense, and they're like, oh my god, 男人? And then you get teams that are just like uncertain, and they're confused as to is it a guy or a girl, but they're using the language to do it. And so you can ask very unique questions about the artist here, and they enjoy it. This is one of their favorite parts of the week. End of Friday, they're all wound up anyway, so, have something a little bit more mellow, but at least they're reviewing everything they know. And they can handle this. They can figure out the age numbers and so forth. But it's just kind of a nice refresher for the week. All right, so we jump into the final case. And what we realized is, hey, this guy looks familiar. He was that guy in the first case. And that guy looks familiar. He was the one who was just talking, who made the terrible mapo tofu. And maybe I'm next, right? Okay, as the victim. So, okay, somehow this case is connected, right? We don't know how, but it looks like they're taking out people who know something about this case. All right, or at least trying to. And so we narrow this down, and where do we turn? Of course, we turn to 中国 the Twitter, right? Weibo. We turn to Weibo, and we find where these celebrities are on certain days. And so these are kind of made up, but in the Weibo format, right? In Weibo, you would see these three things at the bottom, and I just have random conversations like, oh my god, I saw Zhou Jielun, okay, and that's kind of what you might see on Weibo, right? In terms of what they see. And so each of these celebrities, each of these people sees a celebrity at a different point in time on a different date, and we got to figure out, okay, let's narrow down. We know the crime committed August 25th. How can we figure that out? Okay, and so they use that to figure out who are the possible suspects, and then we solve the final case in very much the same way. Here are all the key players. God forbid Chen Long, Jackie Chan is the suspect and he's the criminal. He can't possibly have done it, is what my students tell me. But all these other characters are pretty suspicious. Some of them are witnesses, some of them are actually suspects. And so they have to gather a lot of information about those people to solve this case. Similar thing, data sheet, but this is more flexible now. I don't give as much guidance as to right now what they're looking for, but I do want these things. I want to know what objects they have, I know what they're wearing, because the focus at the end of the year is really a unit on clothing and measure words and things like that. So that's really my focus here, and what they were doing that day. So for the sake of time, we'll listen to one. This is a little bit different, and this is a tough one for them, but some of them do very well with it. This is a crime scene explanation. So you kind of seen what my witness.
各位同学，你们好，我们又见面了。
Here is the crime scene investigator, and that guy was actually in a previous case too.
今天我想跟你们讲一下8月15号8点55分发生的事情，在上海第一百货的停车场。那个时候停车场里没有人，只有我一个。停车场的地上，我看见了一件 红色的帽衫和一条紫色的围巾。停车场里有一辆红色的车子，车子的左边有2件白色的 T 恤和一个粉红色的篮球。车的右边呢有一杯可乐和一个麦当劳的杯子。车上有一把伞，一把蓝色的刀和一把橘色的刀，看起来是有3个人在打架，因为刀上有血。
And so it's a very contrived case, but those are it's just getting what clues are left. A lot of clothing items that were left probably from the fighting, we can assume, but they can pick up keywords like 打架, or I think 打架, right, he said, and then they just want to use that word for the rest of the year. So it's like, 每天打架, 金老师我要打架. Okay, all right, so yeah. But you get different witnesses as well, and they're solving the case in very much the same way, but I just wanted to give you a sense of the level progression from the last case to the first case in terms of what people are seeing. I'm going to kind of conclude this real quick. So you've kind of seen the beginning, the end, and here's a wonderful TV show if you get a chance to see it. Many of you might have already. You know, I realized that really the context, when you let the context drive the content, students are excited to learn, whereas they weren't so much before when I was using very traditional textbooks or pulling other resources of people they didn't care about. And one of the things that's important is students know why they're learning. And when you give them a context, when you give them a story-driven thing throughout, they know exactly why they need to use the language. It's very obvious to them. Okay, I need to solve this case. Boom, of course, I'm going to need nationality. The big change I saw from year 1 to year 2 while teaching this is that they were so much more engaged in reading and listening. Like, they're excited now. These are their favorite activities now, to see what's up with this person. You know, how do I solve this case? This is their favorite thing now, whereas before it was so hard to get them to read a block of characters. And then, more importantly, I just became more engaged as a teacher. This was exciting for me. Obviously, you can see it takes a lot of time and effort, but this is something I can use next year for Chinese 1 again, and just kind of switch up the dates or something like that. And it's okay, students will talk about it, but it doesn't make it less exciting. I mean, maybe a little bit less exciting that it's not the first time, but it's still so different to them that it's still worthwhile. I just want to talk about some other possibilities if you're thinking about extending this, and that's, think about it this way. Detectives are a universal thing, no matter where you go, right? So what if you had a detective case that was in historical China? What if you had a detective case that was in Japan, based on Conan and the anime character there? What if you had a detective case in England with Sherlock, and you worked with Watson, and you made a fictional case there and had suspects related to England? Maybe you go to CSI in New York and you make up a case there. And these could be side projects, homework projects that as students do more and more, they just build up more and more cases that they solve. And maybe after they solve 5 cases for a particular place, you give them a sticker and they have a map and they put the sticker on the map and things like that. So really gamifying it a little bit, but making it more compelling for them. The detectives, you know, in language, we're always trying to compare and contrast, and this would be a wonderful way to compare detectives of different cultures and see, hey, what's different about them? What's the same about them? And do something like that. And one final thing that I'll end up with, there are alternatives. So I chose a detective story, but hey, one project I do at the end of the year is a department store project. And I say, you have to create a department store. Teachers are going to vote on these department stores, and you have to sell your products. So you have to advertise your food. You have to advertise your clothing. You have to get celebrity endorsements, and those celebrities have to introduce themselves, and they have to describe themselves, and so that's how I get all the basic information in there. But you could have that going throughout the year, right? It doesn't have to be a project at the end of the year. It could be, here's unit 1, we've learned about all these things, okay, what can you create about your department store? What can we put on the wall? And so that's an alternative maybe for another story-driven project, and maybe there are challenges along the way that come up. Oh, you ran out of money. How are you going to hire money? Well, you got to speak to sponsors, so record a presentation of why you need money, or something like that. You know, the alternatives are really endless, and I just hope that maybe this inspire you a little bit to think about what you can do to really have a story-driven thing that can help your students, because I think it is engaging for a lot of the students, at least the ones that I've taught. Okay, so thank you very much. I really appreciate it. If you have time, if you're, catch a plane, go catch the plane. But if you could just fill out that survey for me at the end, and if you're interested, maybe leave an email, I can get in touch with you, or if you just want to email me, my contact information is there or on the front. But any feedback you could provide me before you go as to what you would like to see more of or what could be helpful, and you just leave it on the back on your way out, that would be great and helpful. If you want to stay and talk for a little bit more, I'd be happy to. But otherwise, we're done here, and thank you very much for coming.